So my name's Keith Anderson. I lead strategy for a company called Profitero. We're an e-commerce analytics company. You've heard the names Nielsen and IRI many times today. You can think of us as a company like that for the e-commerce channel. And we've got a really great panel of some incredibly experienced operators from different parts of the industry. So we're going to spend some time talking about why this is such an important channel and really how you can plan and execute starting now. So let me introduce our panelists. First, Kenji Gjovig, who I've known for a few years and spent some time here in Bentonville. I'll let him tell you a little bit more about himself.
Yeah, my name's Kenji Gjovig. I spent 7 years working for Walmart. 6 of those years were here in Bentonville, working in the Sam's Club business and merchandising. And then I moved out to California to the e-commerce division for Walmart in San Bruno. And a year ago I left Walmart and I started a consulting practice. So now I help companies sell to Walmart as a broker or rep, and mostly focusing on e-commerce sales, but a little bit of brick and mortar as well.
Perfect. Next is Tyler Roney.
Yeah, Ty Roni. I got my background in toys, actually. I used to manage a small retail toy store, and that's where I got my start. I approached my boss one day several years ago and said, hey, I want to start selling on Amazon, and he wasn't interested, so I started doing that. And that's what I've been doing for a long time, and just earlier this year created an agency to help launch and manage other people's products and brands in the Amazon marketplace.
We have Mike Moore, a veteran of some of the biggest CPG companies in the world and a veteran of the digital world.
Thanks. My name is Mike Moore. I've spent most of my career in packaged goods and the majority of my career with Purina, the pet food company, which was acquired by Nestle back in 2001. And over that 15-year time period, I've worked on both the marketing side and the sales side. I spent 3 years in Switzerland at Nestle headquarters setting up a digital marketing operation, and when I repatriated back to St. Louis in 2011, they asked me to start up e-commerce operations at Purina, where I helped establish relationships with Amazon, Walmart, Target.com, and many of the other brick and mortar .coms that exist.
Thanks, Mike. And last, Rob Engel of Angel Sales.
Hi, I'm Robert Engel. My company's Angel Sales. We started the company, my wife and I did 20 years ago. Can't believe it's been that long. We started out as a manufacturer's rep company, taking products to primarily what they called at that time special markets, which was made up of mail order catalogs, sweepstakes houses, space advertisers, credit card insert syndicators, and that sort of thing. And that kind of naturally grew into, because it was a print area, it kind of naturally grew into the internet. So we started selling with companies like Amazon back right after they got out, moved from the book business into the merchandise business. Over the years, we became a product development company, and I have a couple dozen patents and many trademarks, and products that we've developed over the years have been items that, like many of you, have solved some kind of problem in your household and brought them to market through these various areas.
Great. So let's jump into it. It's been an action-packed day with a lot of attention given to how to get on the physical shelf and how to stay on that shelf. Let's just take a minute and talk about why e-commerce is so central to growth. Mike, why is it so important for companies, big companies like yours and emerging brands, to focus here?
One of the mantras at Purina for most of the time that I was there was follow the consumer. And there's no question that as consumers have become familiar with technology that we all carry in our cases or in our pockets and things like that, that people are naturally migrating to e-commerce for ways to purchase products. And in particular categories that are sort of consumption is knowable and predictable, such as the pet category, many of the baby categories such as diapers and foods, and some of the household categories, paper towels, toilet paper, a lot of personal care items, to really just lend themselves to that electronic communication and electronic commerce that exists. So that's been our primary interest in following e-commerce. Plus, we know that the pet category in particular has been really receptive and really sensitive to changes in the retail landscape as we move from traditional grocery into big box retail that is well represented here, moved into Sam's Club and Costco and stores like that. So we know that consumers will naturally migrate into e-commerce as well for our categories.
Yeah, we see while in many CPG categories, the percentage of online sales that are transacted online is still comparatively small versus brick and mortar, the pace of growth is a multiple of 3 to 5x, sometimes even larger. And the percentage of in-store volume that's being influenced by shoppers that are researching or searching online, even if they ultimately buy in a store, is greater than 50% by the end of this year, according to Deloitte. So it's a huge distribution channel, but it's also really a channel for influence. And Ty, maybe you could talk a little bit about, from the perspective of an emerging brand who maybe doesn't have widespread brick and mortar distribution, why is it such an appealing channel?
Yeah, so I mean, I've obviously focused completely on Amazon, but it's an incredibly powerful platform. You know, 39% of people that shop online go straight to Amazon.com. So when they're going to buy a product, that's right where they go. An example, you know, we have a few clients, have about 20 clients, and one of them's a food storage company, and we built out maybe 24 SKUs for them on Amazon in just the last few months, and then in the month of September they did 50,000 in sales, and that's just on Amazon. That's like their launching pad, right? So it's the speed at which you can get to market online, you can get in front of people. It's amazing. It's unmatched in my opinion, and you have, you know, depending on how you do it, and the way that I would recommend it is launching it yourself. You have control over it too. You don't hand over control to anyone else. You control the pricing, you control your messaging. So it's a really great way to get your product out there, and then also just to test. You can learn so much from the Amazon buyer. They're transparent, right? Their reviews show up, they give you feedback as a seller. So it's a great strategic way to kind of launch your product.
Now just to touch on that, when you say the Amazon buyer, it's a little different than that term buyer in the context of that other presentation.
So yeah, the consumer, the consumer that I'm talking about for sure.
And it's a very different playbook. So, you know, we publish every month these reports that we call Amazon Fast Mover reports that just benchmark the best-selling products in about a dozen categories in the U.S. And what shocks me many months is that the brands that you see topping that list are not necessarily the incumbent cheerleaders from the brick and mortar landscape. And it's because while a lot of that context that you would bring to go pitch a buyer at Target or Walmart is helpful to have, you know, there's a number of brands that jumped onto Amazon or other online retailers that really act as platforms. And you don't need to bring a deck. You know, you need to bring a deep understanding of that platform or a partner that understands that platform, and you can vault to national distribution via that platform in a matter of weeks or even days in some cases. So one of the really compelling opportunities to me that online represents is smaller or emerging brands can look much bigger. You can punch way out of your weight class. So Kenji, I'd be curious, how would you compare or contrast a pure play online retailer like Amazon with the .com arm of a massive brick and mortar player like Walmart?
Yeah, so if you read any of the media about Walmart, especially around e-commerce, the messaging is around what they're sort of calling the integration of digital and physical. And so the philosophy, and I don't know if they would say it this way, but I will, is Amazon has a clear lead in pure play e-commerce in terms of technology and distribution, a number of things. And Walmart is racing to catch up on that. But what the assets that they have today that pure plays don't are stores. So one way that Walmart is really trying to compete aggressively is by finding ways to leverage those existing assets in ways that others that don't have. So for example, shipping from store. They have a program called Ship from Store where a customer can shop online on the website and buy it, and it comes from the store. So what makes that magic? Well, you can get it faster if it comes from a store as opposed to a centralized warehouse. It also expands the number of items that can be available in the assortment because if Walmart can't warehouse, you know, a $2 bottle of toothpaste in a DC, but they can ship it from a store for economically a viable way, then that works as well. Another one is grocery home shopping. So this is a very powerful trend that's going on now. Amazon Fresh is expanding. Instacart is kind of one of the big kids on the block there. Walmart is expanding their grocery home shopping program. They have a depot here in Bentonville. They also just recently, I believe it was last week, expanded to 10 additional markets around the country where you can order online and pick up by the store. So if Walmart can be successful at leveraging existing assets in an omni-channel environment, then it really is an interesting play for the space.
So let's say we've got consensus, everybody inside our organizations is bought in, we all agree, we are gonna follow the consumer, we know that's where they're researching, we know that's where they're buying. Robert, what do we do to get started? What do we need in terms of capabilities, tools, partners, skills? How do we optimize our performance in the channel?
I think it starts with a clear understanding of how they go about marketing the product, and you got to really do your homework. I mean, you got to cover the basics. I think that, understanding that if you do make the big splash on Amazon or any online presence, you're going to have to back that up at some point or another, because it is just an increment of the overall marketplace with, a plan of action, like Vanessa was talking about, having the supply chain stuff together. And so, knowing how much it costs to ship your product, knowing your markups, all the brokers that have to be involved later on down the line. So when you're coming to market, you got to make sure that your pricing is right. You got to Amazon will typically will, if you sell directly to them, they'll not take as much of a cut of your product sales price as a retailer will, or even down in the mail order business, we're talking about 3 to 1. So you gotta make sure that you have everything established correctly when you're getting right out of the box. If you do that, then you have a good chance of success later on down the line when it comes to opening up the distribution to other markets. But if you do the opposite and you get all real excited and that you've presented the item to Amazon, or you've gone on the platform and you start selling and you haven't done all of that kind of homework ahead of time, what you'll find is that later on down the line you can't meet the demand of the bigger marketplace, because you don't have built into your product financials all of these other things that come to be, like the package, like retail packaging, for example. You can sell in an online environment. We did this in mail order all the time. It could be in a white box, because at the end of the day, the consumers purchased it off of the placement that was on Amazon, or online, a picture of the product. But if you didn't think about building into your financials retail packaging, which can be really significant, you can add up very quickly to your product costs, then you might find that you can't get to market. And now here you've already established a retail price and a big presence like an Amazon, and you can't meet that same price with the other retailers. And when you have to involve sales representatives and brokers and distributors and all those other layers of distribution, you can't make that same retail price happen. And then there goes your sales story. So I think one of the big things to do the most important thing to do is make sure that you have all of those components clearly mapped out. You build in plenty of margin for yourself, and it also has to make sense. You have to have looked at the competitive landscape. What is out there that's in that marketplace that's like my product, and am I competitively priced? Does it make a good value proposition? So those are all the kind of things that you have to, because of the speed at which you will be exposing the product in an online environment, it's really can end up shooting you in the foot at the end of the day if you haven't done all of those necessary plans and preparation. And you find that you're backpacking, and that's a bad place to be.
So I heard you mention the demand side of things, how you're going to market it, how you're going to merchandise it, but I want to dwell for a second on the supply side, because you raised some really important points, and I think of the pet food business as an interesting case study, because there you have relatively low dollar, in some cases low margin, but the price to weight ratio is a little challenging. And on the other side, it's a highly replenishable category. So what were some of the lessons learned, Mike, over the time that you were sort of stewarding the pet food category into the online channel?
Yeah, we made dry pet food in a variety of sizes. The smallest bag was a 5-pound bag. The biggest bag, which we sold to the likes of Costco and Sam's Club, was a 55-pound bag of food. We didn't sell many 55-pound bags of food online because the shipping cost alone would sometimes outweigh the cost of the product itself. So we really focused our efforts on the right sizes that would sell well, where we didn't have excessive shipping costs. We also found that our canned or wet pet food business did really well because that is probably as close to a book as we could get within Amazon, that it was fairly rigid, it was easy to ship. You didn't have to necessarily do a lot of over packaging on that, so we sold a tremendous amount of our wet pet foods online as well. So it's not one size fits all solution. We really tried at the brand level to find out what's the right item or items that sell well in the line and try to emphasize those online with the likes of Amazon.
And I think a related point, really closely connected to the dynamic within that category, but also some of the supply chain considerations of e-commerce, is the notion of these subscription programs. So Amazon, for example, has a program called Subscribe and Save that originated for consumable products. And you know, as Mike just suggested, the cost of shipping, particularly for these products with a challenging price to weight ratio, is really tough. And one of the insights that Amazon had was that if we can lock households in to a predictable replenishment cadence, we can actually use ground shipping instead of air shipping to get the product there on our schedule. So we'll lock people into, on the 15th or the 28th of every month, you'll get your subscription delivery. We save on some of our shipping fees, and we effectively take that household out of transaction by transaction competition in the marketplace. So that household is locked into that retailer, and they're locked into that brand. And it's the sort of creative thinking that's enabled by e-commerce, and that also is adaptive to the unique supply chain that I think really represents some of the incredible potential in the channel. So let's go back to the demand side a little bit and how you think about getting found and selected at the digital shelf. You know, I think many of us have some experience getting on the shelf in a brick and mortar store and, you know, focusing on eye-level placement, as many facings as possible, secondary positioning on end caps and so on. Ty, how do you think about winning at the digital shelf?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a blessing and a curse to have unlimited shelf space, right? So it takes 2 seconds. You can get your product up there quickly, but if you're not on the first page, I think it's like only about 30% of people go past the first page in the search results on Amazon. So if you're not on the first page, you're really not going to be doing, you know, maybe the incredible volume that you might be hoping for. So it really comes down to knowing how to position your product the right way, and realizing that on Amazon, just as, you know, in the store, somebody walking by the shelves, they are physically looking at the products and they make a decision, and then they pick it out, right? But online, it's even easier because you're literally scrolling down with your finger, and so you have to make sure that you're crafting your content. It's all about your content and your images. I mean, those are the two things you have to start with that people see. So, and that's what's so great about emerging brands is if you take the time and you invest in your product, you make really great images, and you make sure that you have good content in your title and on your listing, they see it and it looks just as good as any other product, perhaps even better because you put the time into that. And in Amazon, at least, you need to make sure that you invest in the marketing opportunities that are available. So Amazon has their whole, an entire pay-per-click program for their sellers. It's within their platform, and it's extremely powerful. And if you treat it like a real business, you know, and most companies would say, yeah, I'd be willing to spend, you know, X amount of dollars a month in advertising, but some of my clients have a really tough time wanting to spend much money in pay-per-click. But look, at the end of the day, if you're willing to advertise, it can be very powerful for you, because with Amazon, what Amazon cares about is sales, right? So Google's very much relevance and SEO type stuff, and Amazon's SEO is really sales. So if a customer finds your listing, clicks on it, purchases your item, that kind of gives you a bump in their system saying, hey, let's recognize this guy, let's move him up in the search rankings because people found it and they bought it. So whether they do that organically or whether they find it through the ads, Amazon doesn't care. In fact, they probably really like it that you're spending money with them. So I think really is making sure you have really great content, formatted the right way, position your product professionally as possible, and then invest the money to advertise for it.
Go ahead.
Can I make a comment about that? So that's a great point. At its core, a search engine on an e-commerce site has two inputs, sales and content. And it becomes a flywheel when you do well on both. So when you first launch a product on Amazon or Walmart.com, for example, and you have 0 sales, the only thing you really have is content. So if you have lots of imagery and good imagery, robust copy, descriptions, et cetera, and if you can add in things like ratings and reviews and maybe videos, product comparison guides, et cetera, the search algorithm naturally starts to pick that up more, and that causes your ranking to rise. And as Ty just mentioned, the more you sell, then the more that also bumps up your rankings. So it definitely becomes a flywheel, because if you beat everybody else out on content and you start to sell more products, then now you're hitting on both the content side and the sales side. And so if you just play around on Amazon, I was just looking at a brand called Smarty Pants Vitamins. I talked to them several months ago, and they're a brand that you don't really know in many stores, but they have some of the top-selling vitamins on Amazon, and it's because the founders of the company are digital natives, and they focused on e-commerce at their core. And so the bigger, I don't want to say tired brands, but the brands that did not grow up using e-commerce, that you are more familiar with and are on physical shelves in every store, don't do as well on Amazon because they don't win the content battle, and they start to lose the sales battle, and so it becomes a king of the hill exercise.
You mentioned reviews too. That I forgot to mention that it's reviews on Amazon and online in general. People love. They believe each other more than they believe the guy trying to sell the product, right? So reviews are huge, and you can on Amazon you're permitted to give away products in return for a review, as long as you don't do it excessively, whatever that means. But getting those reviews and getting other people to talk about your product as quickly as possible is one of the key ways that you can establish yourself as a real brand and a real product.
And just to emphasize, you want to be really careful. There's this term astroturfing, which is, it looks real, but on closer inspection, it's not. As it relates to reviews, there are some partners, even Amazon, and I know in some countries, Walmart.com has a program that lets you distribute samples to shoppers who are under no obligation to review the product, but they understand their eligibility for the program is predicated on reviewing products and giving their true opinion. But whether your primary focus is on growing sales in the online channel or simply representing your brand in the very best possible light, because those consumer reviews are so trusted, it's a really great idea for some of your big new launches or some of your blockbuster SKUs to at least consider those kinds of campaigns. And if you've got a mailing list, email or physical mailing list, and you have loyal shoppers, you can build on that brand advocacy simply by suggesting, hey, if you bought this and you enjoyed it, please go review it at any of these online retailers. And hey, send us a link to the review. Maybe we'll give you a little discount on your next order. So be thinking of ways that you can build on your existing loyal shopper base to amplify their loyalty through these ratings and reviews, because the influence they have is just profound.
One last point about reviews, sorry to keep going. So if you have your own brand site and customers who are evangelists for your product, your brand, if you have the capability for customers to post reviews on your site, you can syndicate those reviews onto Walmart.com. I'm not sure if Amazon has the capability, but that allows you to then have just a larger number of reviews on your site without having to earn them on the site by syndicating them. You can't, for example, syndicate a native Amazon review elsewhere, but if you own the property on your brand.com site, then you can syndicate to Walmart.com.
There's one thing I want to make sure we don't overlook, because we all are in this every day and we know all the nuts and bolts, but I don't know how many people out there know that how Amazon kind of grew. Everybody knows that they started out in books and media and then went into merchandise, but I think, was it 2006 or something like that, they introduced the merchant seller platform, somewhere around there. And so there's two ways that you can sell to Amazon or through Amazon. You can either become a merchant on the Amazon platform, where you are actually putting up the content and doing all the advertising yourself, or they do have buyers, and that's the way they started out in the merchandise business. where you actually go make a presentation just like Walmart or any brick and mortar, and the buyer says, okay, yeah, I'll take your product on, and then they'll sell it. Now there's some key differences that come about now because they've started running these two platforms. Like for example, when you sell to Amazon, like I do, they have strict rules about the content. For example, all the images have to be on a white background. You don't have as much control over the presentation of your product as you do when you are a merchant seller. So like, and the flip side of that is later on down the line, when you start distributing to other people, like mail order catalogs, for example, they might also have an online presence as a merchant seller on the Amazon platform. Now you have a problem where there's cross-competition and cannibalizing of your original Amazon listing that's going on because this guy is out there, and guess what? He's got a better price, so he undercuts your price, and then there becomes an issue about price control and everything like that. So I want to make sure that we covered that there are these two different platforms that are kind of going on concurrently out there, and how you approach that whole business. And another thing that's and maybe you guys can answer this question for me because you guys are in it on a much more regular basis than I am. But have you ever looked at the performance of, and I'm doing my own tests, I've got a merchant seller who's selling my item. It's a flower sprinkler. It looks like a daisy and it just goes like this. You hook it up to a hose. And Amazon also sells that. So will they push their own listings, the things that are being sold to them directly as a company, more in the results than a merchant seller, for example? Because I know there's other guys out there that, like All Star Products, it's a big DRTV advertiser. They did this little item called the Snuggie. They won't advertise on Amazon at all because of all these cross issues that start happening. But do you guys know have any information about that?
We have some analytics. Basically, if Amazon carries an item itself and it turns a profit on it, it's likely to support its own listing in the buy box. But they try to run themselves as a seller on this marketplace in as transparent and above board a way as they can. So when you hear this discussion of Amazon's first party and third party businesses, first party means they're sourcing the merchandise directly from suppliers and they take ownership of that inventory and resell it as a retailer. Third party means you or another third party seller is selling it. And they view themselves as just another seller on the marketplace. So they'll look at their own stock levels, they've got their own rules-based engine around item level profitability, they'll look at support they might have received from their vendors for that item. But more often than not, if a vendor is selling the item directly to Amazon and the economics have been well managed, Amazon is going to win that buy box. And so all of these offers are presented on the same product page, which means, if you're competing as a third-party seller, you are essentially competing with Amazon. But there are situations where Amazon is unwilling to price at the same level that third-party sellers are pricing, or they may be out of stock on an item. Those are really the two drivers, and in those cases, the third parties tend to win.
I think the third-party marketplace represents some challenges for any seller on Amazon, especially. There are intellectual property issues. You don't have any control over what's said about your product if somebody in this room is selling it on the third-party marketplace on Amazon. If it's outright wrong, if it's for whatever reason incorrect, you can appeal to Amazon and they will help you police that third-party marketplace. But it is a little bit of the Wild West as a first-party seller.
That's because anybody can write on your listing.
Yeah.
Once you establish what they call an ASIN number or SKU number, anybody that's a seller of that same item can write on that listing. So when you go and click on an item, for example, it says also available from these sellers, and then you click on that and you see like 6 different people that are selling the exact same item. They haven't put any content of their own up there. They're just piggybacking onto you. And it could be somebody from Hong Kong, for example, or China. And it opens up a whole array of issues that are difficult to control.
Yeah, I think, and that goes back to managing your channels, right? Your own distribution. So I'm a huge proponent in our agency. I mean, we manage people's accounts selling to Amazon, wholesaling to Amazon and letting them retail. We manage that for people, but we don't recommend it just because you're so limited in the marketing initially and limited in your control and the pricing and everything. So I'm all about being that third-party seller, but controlling it. And if you manufacture your own product, you be the only seller on Amazon that's selling that product. And initially that's easy, right? Because if you're the only one making it and you're launching it there, nobody else gets a hold of it. But you can run into issues with maybe Chinese manufacturers or somebody that are literally counterfeiting your product and trying to sell it on there. But I think that's, that comes back to just the managing your own distribution and being very careful about who you're selling your product to, because that's when it gets tricky and you have to compete against your own wholesalers, right? So.
Yeah, Ty and Mike, you both said things that I would almost encapsulate as the best offense, or the best defense is a good offense. If you expect Amazon to, as Mike said, police their marketplace on your behalf and be proactively looking for IP or counterfeit violations, it's not going to happen. With rare exception, if you happen to sell, for example, infant formula or some product with a health and wellness orientation, they have, in rare instances, stepped in. But ultimately, if you want to present your brand to the best potential, as Ty says, you need to get out there and actively manage your presence there, and you have to control your distribution and supply chain to minimize the potential that others are going to be competing with you on Amazon. And the other, just Bill, briefly, is I think for any individual company in the room, this question of do I sell directly to Amazon or do I establish myself as a 3P seller, the answer is going to be a little bit different. There are so many advantages, especially in the early days, to establishing yourself as a 3P seller because you have much more direct control. You're not at Amazon's whim. In the second quarter of this year, a lot of the large manufacturers had meaningful percentages of their portfolio delisted simply because Amazon needed to hit profitability targets for the quarter. And so some of our customers' best performing SKUs were abruptly delisted, which put them in a very tough position. So being your own third-party seller, even as a hedge, make sure that you're in stock and available at your own leisure, not at Amazon's. As you start to build volume, think of a brand like Kind Snacks, which was sort of a dark horse over the last 5 years. Started very small, but grew exponentially and now dominates our fast movers list in the categories they compete in. They definitely evolved and now do business directly with Amazon. And as a result, they're eligible for programs like Subscribe and Save, some of these other added value programs that Amazon reserves for its larger direct vendors. So there were some challenges. We spent the first section here all about the opportunity and how you can get out and dominate this channel, but we started to hear hints that it may not all be sunshine and roses. I heard IP issues. What are some of the other big challenges of doing business online?
I think one of the bigger challenges that we faced into one of the topics that was discussed earlier about the power of crowds is what's been talked about up here already in terms of reviews. And the review volume on Amazon alone is pretty staggering. We had about 30 reviews a day written on Purina products, of which we sold 900 SKUs on Amazon, and that compares to 15 to 20 reviews a month on a brick and mortar retail site. And there clearly is a herd mentality. As somebody writes a negative review about a product, Purina had some products that were sourced out of China with chicken, and the China haters came onto Amazon and were writing some pretty political and politically motivated type of reviews. And there clearly was a crowd mentality where there was a lot of piling on of those reviews, and it began to almost spiral out of control until we were able to basically step in and create some facts or present some facts about the product sourced from China. So I think that is another watch out for any product, big or small, is the crowd or herd mentality associated with reviews.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point, especially when you're starting out. You have to be looking at those reviews every single day and responding to them. We have somebody that does that every single day. They take a look at it, because not just so much in the context of the business that's on Amazon, but in the larger world. You have to, because guess where every buyer goes to find out about products? I mean, and I'm talking about Walmart buyers. They go to Amazon. The first thing they do is they Google the product and they see how much is it out there, who's got it, what's the price, what are the reviews. And you know, and I'll have happen many times now where it never happened in the past because it was before the internet. You know, hey, I've been reading a lot of bad reviews on Amazon about your product, and you know, and it'll kill the sale. And so you'll find that just one, you know, negative Nelly will really make all the difference in the whole world to the success of your product at other markets.
You know, you raise another one, which is the price transparency in the online channel. As you said, you know, Amazon is now well understood to have a dynamic pricing engine that uses competitors' prices as one input. Walmart has got a similar capability. There's this new player, Jet.com, whose model has evolved a little bit just over the last month, but that basically launched to undercut Amazon on price. And we have customers every week who are getting inquiries from their buyers, both brick and mortar and online, saying, hey, I saw this price the other day. You know, I used camel.com or some other, you know, free-to-use price history tracker, and I don't understand why you're giving them a better deal than us. And so just from a capability perspective, you need to understand how each of these retailers arrives at the price that they're displaying to the consumer. You need to build your script for how to justify what's happening and how it is or is not within your control. And just like reviews, you need visibility into how that's evolving week over week, because it's only going to get more transparent. The competition is only going to intensify. And I've seen more brands caught in that crossfire and blindsided it than I care to admit.
The way I would answer that is there's actually a fair amount of risk to your own brand equity if you don't have the capability to manage an e-commerce business and you don't actively do it. So for example, we talked about ratings and reviews. If there are reviews that are negative, that can hurt you. Now there's data from Bazaar Voice and others that show that when a brand responds to a negative review and apologizes or sort of tries to rectify the situation, we'll send you a free sample, for example, that the purchase intent goes up by like 186%. So you can actually make lemonade out of lemons. Another example is questions and answers. Walmart and Amazon have the ability for a customer to just post a question. And so if you just do a basic audit, if you just go to a few listings on Walmart.com, even the biggest brands on the planet, and you see customer questions asked, so many of them go unanswered. I mean, how bad does that look on your brand if they don't even ask or answer the question? Or even imagery, for example. The analogy that I usually use with people when I talk about content is most companies in the brick and mortar environment spend so much time thinking about the box. Every square inch of the package has to be optimized. You have to have the right language and the right nutrition facts, things like that. But people spend a tiny fraction of the same amount of time managing their listings on an e-commerce site. And so if you have low resolution imagery, for example, and I've shown brands examples of imagery where you can't even read the size of the package, or you can't really tell what it is because it's so blurry. So even if if for e-commerce to some degree, if you're not going to do it right, you shouldn't do it at all, because you actually risk doing a fair amount of damage to your brand. I think it's actually relatively easy to make good progress on it, but you kind of have to do it and put the right capabilities in place, or hire the right help to do that.
Yeah, I would say Kenji made a really good point that hasn't been discussed yet, is that the digital shelf is different than the physical shelf. And at the physical shelf, you mainly rely on the product, and all your work goes into the product because you can physically pick it up and read all four panels or the sides of the package. And in the digital shelf, two-dimensional, there's no such thing as picking up the product. So you really do have to invest in photography, digital imagery, video, things like that to basically tell the brand story online that can't be done in a two-dimensional space.
Returns in e-commerce are incredibly high relative to brick and mortar, because you know what you're getting when you're in a store. But if you're going to buy something that's a high dollar and it comes in a box, you have to put it together. If you don't have a lot of images of what the assembled product looks like, and maybe instructions so a customer can get a sense for what they're really getting, they might think they're getting something and then get something else in return, which is incredible. The returns process for e-commerce is incredibly expensive for brands and for vendors. So, you have to prevent buyer's remorse by having really good content, so at the very least, customers know what they're getting, and then of course, to help with conversion to close that sale.
Why don't we pause there and take a couple of questions? So a couple of questions from the audience before we finish up. Back here.
So in the music business, we're starting to see a lot more of obviously brand
stuff. We've been testing some product recognition technology video players where a band creates video content, puts it on the website, the fan is able to click that product, say a Coke product, and it drives you to Walmart.com to buy a 12-pack of Coke. What are you guys seeing from the store side of things in these type of new startup technologies with product recognition and stuff like that?
We've been following those emerging technologies for several years, and I think especially from an impulse merchandising perspective, there's a lot of hope that they make it easier to prompt purchases through all kinds of digital touch points, and there is a lot of potential there. I mean, Ty said something earlier about the resistance to spending marketing dollars online, but if you think about it, the distance between a display ad and the opportunity to transact is getting smaller and smaller. I think in the near term, the challenge is shoppers just don't understand and haven't adopted a lot of these technologies. So there's all kinds of companies, particularly in impulse-oriented categories, like beverages and confection and batteries, who are trying to prompt purchases during videos, all over the place. And I think we're going to get there. But I wouldn't have huge expectations in the next quarter to drive immense volume through them, because there's just a little education that's still necessary. But there will be an inflection point where everybody's going to recognize, oh, I can add that item to my cart. Oh, this is going to take me to Walmart.com or Amazon, and I can buy now. And as soon as that happens, I think it has huge potential.
I would also say that I wish I had a crystal ball, because if I did, I would maybe doing something different. But the way I would see it is we all should be paying close attention to these trends, because they're trends that are happening rapidly and that are changing things quickly. I mean, for example, Facebook and Twitter are launching buy buttons where you can make a purchase directly on their site without having to leave and go to be redirected to another retailer. Uber, for example, a technology company. Most people see them as a transportation company, but they like to think of themselves as a technology company. They're to some degree in the business of delivering packages. So brands and retailers should be thinking about how technology and just other companies are innovating and disrupting the model, because at some point it could either be, just a little bit binary, either a risk for us or a big opportunity, and maybe both. A risk if we don't act, and a big opportunity if we do act. So either way, we should all have a high sense of intellectual curiosity to be following the trends and sort of be thinking about how we can take advantage of whatever the trend is.
Another question. I have one for me. If we were going to encourage this group, because they're all going to leave and go, we're going to start to do whatever, right? If anything happens. If you're going to encourage them to start here first and here second, I do everything from my own site to, eBay to Amazon, Walmart.com, pick a thing. If I was going to start somewhere first, and where would be a close second? Starting here, going across it. I've got a product, I've got some sales, I've got my 5,000 units, and I'm trying to get some sales, and I've got a website. Where would I start first, and where would be my close second? The guys are out here. Start over here and go left or right.
I think undoubtedly I got the easiest position because it's Amazon. It's the tail that wags the dog.
You start with Amazon first?
Absolutely.
Okay, where would be a close second?
Everybody seems to be following that model, so until I saw a track record, I wouldn't pick a second.
Amazon because of scale, and I would suggest starting your own site and doing your own fulfillment as well to augment the Amazon business.
You know what I'm going to say? I'm going to say Amazon. So, Amazon. And then the next, I mean, from what I learned about the other marketplaces, and I spent a lot of time talking to people that own different softwares for all the different, platforms, but eBay is actually still a pretty big platform. It's not nearly as good or convenient, in my opinion, as Amazon, but that's where I'd go second.
And no question, you have to start on Amazon, but one way I would offer a different suggestion is start on Amazon, but use those learnings to apply to other retailers. If you develop really good content that you can use on Amazon, you can use that or similar content on other sites. What I find when I worked at Walmart in the e-commerce division, when I consult with companies large and small now, both big and small companies don't really know how to think about content. They either haven't learned the lessons from Amazon to be able to apply them elsewhere, or they just never learned the lesson to begin with. So start with Amazon because it's an easy tool to use. The technology is very simple, but then be able to repurpose the learnings and the content for other websites.
Well, I have to go against the grain. I can't say Amazon. I would start with Amazon, but the other emerging market that you may want to consider is China. And the demand is much stronger, I think, for established brands. But they're starting to materialize some success stories of even emerging brands, Western brands, that are catering to just this immense demand among the growing middle class in China for status-oriented brands. And so if you understand that dynamic, there are all kinds of retailers, including Alibaba and others, that are introducing programs that make it effectively turnkey for brands to introduce their brands into China through e-commerce. And so after Amazon, I would start to explore that.